There comes a moment on the journey when love stops being a mirror of our emptiness and becomes the reflection of our own freedom. A moment when the heart, weary of losing itself in promises and illusions, begins to understand that love is not something to be conquered, it is something to be allowed. When that happens, the fire that once burned with fever turns into light, and that light does not wish to possess, only to illuminate. For most of our lives, we were taught to love as though making a deal. We give to receive, yield to be accepted, promise to be chosen. We called it love, but it was a contract. We called it surrender, but it was fear of loss. For most people, love was shaped as a game of exchanges, and each heart learned to calculate how much it could give without falling apart. But free love knows no such arithmetic. It does not measure, it does not weigh, it does not demand guarantees. It simply flows like two rivers that touch and continue on. Free love is not the end of emotion, it is the end of captivity. It is born when consciousness matures enough to see that the other did not come to fill what is missing, but to reflect what already overflows. At that point, love stops being a search and becomes an expression. It is no longer about needing someone, but about sharing one's own being. It is love that arises from wholeness, not from lack. And paradoxically, this love is the rarest of all, because it requires something the ego deeply fears: completeness. As long as we remain hungry halves, we will see the other as a patch, not a mirror. We will seek closeness not out of fullness, but out of escape. And thus, love becomes confusion, attachment, drama. Free love can only bloom when the soul has found rest within itself. When that happens, something changes in the vibration. The gaze becomes calmer, the touch more conscious, the desire quieter. Love stops being an impulse that drags and becomes a current that sustains. It is like the meeting of two rivers that run strong but need not merge to recognize themselves as water. Each keeps its own course, its own origin, its own identity, and it is precisely this that makes the meeting beautiful. Free love does not fear distance. It understands that absence is also part of the flow. It knows that space is not a threat, but a breath, the interval where feeling renews itself, like fire needing air to keep burning. And it is in this natural rhythm, closeness and distance, presence and silence, that love matures and stops being fever, becoming awareness. But the path to this is paved with unlearning. One must unlearn the love that suffocates, the love that demands proof, the love that turns another into a guarantee of happiness. One must abandon the idea that to love is to fuse, because fusion is not unity, it is loss, and free love does not want to erase, it wants to reveal. It does not dim individuality, it illuminates it. When two awakened beings meet, there is no attempt to possess, there is only recognition. It is as if they were saying to one another, "I see you, not who I want you to be, but who you truly are." And in that seeing, there is no control, only reverence. Love becomes sacred not because it follows rituals, but because it recognizes the mystery that dwells within every being. It is a love that does not feed on urgency. It can wait, it can breathe, it can exist even in the other's absence. Because free love does not need constant presence, it lives from the living memory of what is true. It does not die when the body moves away, because it was never bound to form. It moves in the dimension of being, not possession. And precisely for that reason, it is a love that frightens. The world calls it detachment, as if it were coldness. But free love is not indifference, it is clarity. It does not stop feeling, it simply stops getting lost in the feeling. It does not close the heart, it simply refuses to chain it. It does not abandon the other, it simply lets them be free. Free love is a form of courage, the courage to stay open, even while knowing that everything is impermanent. The courage to love without guarantees, to walk without certainties, to trust without demanding return. This courage is the fire that purifies, and free love is that flame, burning yet serene, intense yet aware. And little by little, you realize that this love is not something you find, but something you become. It does not arrive from outside, it awakens from within. It arises when the heart stops begging and begins to give. when the fear of loss dissolves and the joy of existence becomes enough, when love ceases to be a need and becomes a nature. And little by little, you realize that this love is not something you find but something you become. It does not arrive from outside, it awakens from within. It arises when the heart stops begging and begins to give. When the fear of loss dissolves and the joy of existence becomes enough. When love ceases to be a need and becomes a nature. To love freely is to stop trying to capture the river. It is to learn to admire it as it passes, knowing that beauty lies in the movement itself. It is to understand that love belongs to no one, just as the wind does not belong to the field it crosses. It comes, touches, transforms, and moves on. And if it returns, it is only because it never truly left it, merely changed form. Free love needs no eternity, because it is eternal in every moment it is lived with full presence. It does not promise forever, it says now. And this now is infinite enough. Over time, you begin to realize that to love freely is, in truth, the deepest form of trust in life itself, because to love without holding on, you must believe that nothing true can ever be lost. That love does not need to be protected, only lived. This kind of trust is rare, because we were raised in fear. From an early age, we were taught that love means taking risks, that loss is inevitable, that we must hold tightly to what we love. But free love laughs at these attempts at control. It does not defend itself, it surrenders. The heart that has learned free love is like a flame that no longer fears the wind. It burns steadily, not because it is weak, but because it is stable. It understands that intensity does not lie in the size of the fire, but in the quality of the light it gives off. And that light is born from the understanding that every being has their own path, and that love is not a detour, but an invitation to walk side by side for as long as it feels natural. Free love does not promise continuity, it promises truth. It does not promise eternity, it promises presence. It does not need to guarantee the future, because it trusts in the integrity of the now. It knows that love that tries to guarantee itself has already begun to die, for love cannot survive in cages, only in flight. And this love, though the purest, is also the most demanding, because it gives the ego no ground to stand on. It requires that you love without the net of possession, without the cushion of emotional security, without the shield of promises. The ego, used to control, panics. But what if the other leaves? It asks. And free love answers, then they were never yours. When you love like this, you discover that the beauty of love lies not in permanence, but in authenticity. That to love is a gesture that does not require reciprocity, because it is complete in itself. To love freely is to allow the other to keep being who they are, even if that leads them away from you. It is a love that does not imprison. It simply wishes for the other to bloom, even if not by your side. But it would be a mistake to think this is coldness. Free love is not the absence of connection, it is presence without confinement. It feels deeply, but it does not cling. It cares, but it does not claim ownership. It gives itself, but it does not disappear. It is the invisible balance between attachment and indifference, the meeting point where the heart and consciousness align. To reach that point, one must cross the desert of illusions. One must let go of the stories we tell about love let die, the idea that to love is to be chosen, saved, or needed. Free love is not a role to be played, but a vibration to be felt. It does not arise from the meeting of two lacks, but from the union of two freedoms. When two such flames meet, there is no theater, there is recognition. It is as if the universe, for an instant, were looking at itself through two pairs of eyes and saying, "Ah, so this is how love expresses itself in human form." They do not seek each other to be completed, but are drawn to one another because they share the same light. They are two wholes meeting, and they respect each other's wholeness. Between them, silence is comfortable. There is no need to prove, to explain, to ask. Simply being is enough. And it is precisely this naturalness that unsettles those who still live by the old paradigm. To those who still confuse love with need, free love seems too detached, but to those who have already crossed their own abyss, it is the only kind of love that makes sense. Free love is a dance of two souls that do not drag one another, but move in harmony, each with its rhythm, each with its space. Sometimes they dance close, sometimes they drift apart. But the music continues, and the flow never breaks, because there is trust. And trust is the soil in which true love grows. It is not born from promises, but from perception. You see the other and feel that you can rest. There is no need to guard, to fear, or to pretend. There is transparency, and that transparency itself is the miracle. Because free love does not fear being seen in its entirety. It does not need to hide its shadows or exaggerate its light. It exists as it is, imperfect, yet authentic. In time, you begin to understand that loving freely is not only a way of loving another, but also a way of loving yourself. It is allowing yourself to exist without guilt, without the burden of pleasing, without the obligation to fit into expectations. It is a love that begins within, and the within overflows outward. And that overflowing is what changes everything. Because finally, love ceases to be an experience of lack and becomes an experience of abundance. You no longer love to gain something you love, because there is too much in you not to be shared. Free love is love that needs no reason. It is the reason itself. Yet there is an even subtler beauty in it. Free love does not oppose human love. It does not deny touch, desire, or connection. It simply purifies them. It removes the poison of possession and restores the sweetness of presence. It transforms desire into contemplation, touch into communion, bond into celebration. And when love reaches that point, it ceases to be something between two people and becomes an energy that permeates everything. To love someone is to love the world through that person. It is to look at them and see the reflection of the whole. It is to recognize that the same breath that moves them is the one that moves you. Free love is the moment when I and you stop being boundaries and become passageways, two flames, two rivers flowing in the same direction, without haste, without fear, without destination. Only movement. With time, something deeper begins to unfold. Love stops being merely a relationship and reveals itself as a state of consciousness. What once existed as space between two becomes the very fabric that binds everything. At this point, love ceases to be a verb and becomes a substance, the invisible air breathing through all beings. You begin to realize that love is not something that happens between two beings, but through them. It is not born from the encounter is simply the means by which it manifests. Love belongs to no one. It only passes, touches, transforms, and continues on. And every time it passes, it leaves behind a trace of clarity. Free love, therefore, is love aware of its own nature. It is not the impulse struggling to survive. It is the presence that recognizes itself as already eternal. For that reason, it does not fear change, nor ending, nor distance, because where true love exists, there is no opposite. The opposite of love is not hate, it is fear. And when fear dissolves, love ceases to be an emotion and becomes vision. You start to see love in everything, in the breeze passing through the leaves, in the quiet gaze of a stranger, in the moment sunlight touches water. Everything begins to appear made of the same essence. What was once I and you dissolves into something greater, a field of unity, where separation no longer exists. And paradoxically, it's when you understand that nothing belongs to you, that everything becomes intimate. Free love is not confined to people. It extends to existence itself. It is the love that feels reverence for the mystery, that bows before simplicity, that recognizes beauty even in pain. It does not seek pleasure alone, it seeks truth, because it has already understood that truth is the only ground on which love can bloom. And the deeper this love grows, the quieter it becomes. It no longer needs to announce itself, nor to be proclaimed. It manifests in small gestures, in listening, in presence, in respecting the freedom of another. It is love that does not wish to convince, only to understand, that does not wish to dominate, only to be. This is the point where love ceases to be human and becomes divine, not in a religious sense, but in the truest sense of the word. Love that recognizes itself as the essence of being itself. Love that looks at the world and says, everything that exists is a variation of me. But this awareness carries a paradox. By seeing love in everything, you also see the pain of the world more vividly. You feel the suffering of those trapped in illusion, the despair of those who still confuse attachment with affection, possession with surrender. And sometimes the awakened heart grieves not in judgment, but in compassion. It is like watching a child dream a nightmare and knowing that, no matter how much you wish to wake them, they must awaken on their own. This is the compassion of free love, silent, patient, unhurried in its teaching. It understands that every soul has its own timing, and that even pain is part of revelation. Free love does not try to convert anyone, it simply remains, like the sun that shines without asking who deserves its light. And so, love matures until it is no longer directed toward someone, but toward everything. You love because it is your nature to love. Love becomes your way of being. There is no effort, no desire for return. You love whatever stands before you, a person, a landscape, a silence with the same serene intensity. And in that state, love becomes truly free, because it no longer depends on the beloved. It does not fade when the other departs, because the other was never the source, only a mirror. Free love is the fire that keeps burning even as the wind changes direction. It is the river that keeps flowing even as its bed transforms. Then one day, you realize that to love and to live are the same thing, that everything that breathes is, in itself, an act of love. That existence itself is an infinite romance between the visible and the invisible, and the awakened human, upon realizing this, stops seeking love as a goal and begins to embody love as presence. In this state, every encounter is a miracle, and every separation a continuation. Nothing is wasted. Even absence has its flavor, because free love is so vast that even silence fits within it. It does not need the constant presence of the other, for the other already lives within consciousness. To love this way is to walk lightly, to live with an open heart and empty hands, to know that nothing can be possessed, yet everything can be celebrated. It is love that neither clings nor flees, that makes no promises, yet fulfills the now with completeness. And in the end, this is what remains: the now, the instant, the touch, the gaze, the breath. Everything real happens here, and in this moment, free love is total. It does not wait for tomorrow to be confirmed, nor does it need the past to be justified. It is complete whenever lived with awareness. And when two beings live this way, the entire world changes tone. Time seems to slow down, words lose importance. There is an invisible harmony, holding everything together, as if the universe, for an instant, were breathing through two bodies. They are two flames that do not extinguish each other, but strengthen one another. Two rivers that do not merge out of need, but out of choice. They walk together for as long as their paths align, and when the flow separates them, there is no pain, only gratitude. Because free love does not demand permanence, it gives thanks for what was, blesses what will be, and rests in what is. It understands that love is not measured by duration, but by the depth with which it was lived. And in that understanding, true freedom is born, the freedom to love without fear of loss, the freedom to feel without being imprisoned, the freedom to exist without needing to explain. In the end, free love is the highest form of surrender, not to another, but to life itself. It is the acceptance of mystery, the trust in flow, the willingness to let the river follow its course. Because love, when it is real, never ends. It only changes form. And thus, everything completes itself. There are no longer boundaries between self and world, between lover and beloved, between fire and water. There is only the eternal movement of consciousness loving itself through infinite forms. Two flames, two rivers, one flow, one love,